So not only the post office. Well, I've been going round lots of people and meeting with lots of people from some of the organisations that have been trying to change the criminal justice system and to right some of the awful miscarriages of justice that have gone on. And I've got to say, predominantly everybody seems to feel a gathering kind of like Mr. Bates and the post office would be a very good thing, but there are problems with it. One of the problems being, as I think I mentioned last week, that actually it's too complicated. The public can't latch on to something that is that broad, and they really want something much simpler. But then again, on the other hand, while people thought it was a very good idea, they also had the feeling that the media, which does like to latch on to something, would latch on to all the bad things and would have a real go at the people who actually have not been cleared of their convictions, like me, for example, and especially my aspect of do not vote in the general election or the May elections unless a candidate has pledged in writing to make 6 various things about the criminal justice system get changed as a priority in their first year of serving wherever it is they were voted in for. But a lot of people don't like that either, and feel that voting is far too important to be done than to be tied to one specific issue. And they also felt that really wouldn't work. So I've got to say, at the present moment, it does look as though the vast majority of people think, great idea, but won't work, so I probably won't do it. 6 things I wanted candidates to guarantee they do were immediate massive increase in funding and training at the CCRC, adding hundreds of lawyers with the goal of sorting out past miscarriages of justice within a year and aiming at sending 25% of applications back to the Court of Appeal. Immediate instruction to police to stop the "you will be believed" approach and to instruct claimants that all allegations will be fully investigated and the result may lead to prosecution either way, and to stop calling all accusers victims, and even sometimes have 2 SIOs for balancing investigations. Immediate instruction to the CBS that they must take a balanced approach to decisions on whether to prosecute by equal examination of both sides of cases. Immediate instructions to media of anonymity for both sides in sex allegation cases until after conviction, not charge. Immediate instruction to lawyers for stricter controls over efficiency and ethical behaviour on both sides and increase in legal aid payments in return. And 6, immediate return to the presumption of innocence by the courts instead of the current use of the phrase whilst actually embracing presumption of guilt. So at last this week I managed to get to see Poor Things, which I tried to get to see last weekend but couldn't because of the traffic throughout London and all the protest marches. It's a fascinating film. It's a bit like a Salvador Dali painting on film. And it started off, and for about the first half hour, even the first hour, I was thinking, this is actually a very good film if you like that sort of thing, and to be honest, I don't like that sort of thing. Then it began to grow on me, and by the end of it, I thought, actually, it's a very good film, and it's certainly a very different film. I would actually recommend it. But funnily enough, for the rest of the last week or so, I've been catching up on Stranger Things, the Netflix series that culminated in the musical that I went to the other week. And I've been watching all the series. I suppose you call it binge watching. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very well made. Although I said earlier on, it's very much like Steven Spielberg meets Stephen King, but much more the Goonies rather than one of his E.T. movies or one of those really intelligent Stephen King books. But it is really good. The whole Stranger Things, excellent Netflix movie series. But I have to say, Poor Things is much, much stranger than Stranger Things. It is rather odd when you read in the Times an obituary for a relative of yours. Inga Elliott, who is married to Oz Elliott. Oz was my godfather, or actually my brother's godfather, all part of my family, or my American father's family, and yet I didn't hear from any of my relatives in America that Inga had passed away aged 90 last week until I read it in the Times today.
I woke up this morning and looked at her face. Boy, was I drunk last night, what a disgrace. Her physical defects were legion beneath the sickly sweet odor of old rotting teeth. I gave up my boyhood when day became night, and I had to get stoned so that I'd do it right. I came to a man with a sense of relief and the sickly sweet odor of old rotting teeth. I saw the grey hairs poking under the wig and winced at the sores on the face of a pig. In her hand was a virgin she held like a thief to the sickly sweet odor of old rotting teeth. I ran to the bathroom to scrub off my woes and escape from the tinea that rose from her toes. As I polished away a ring of confidence wreath, smelt the sickly sweet odor of my own rotting teeth. Oh, 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 I'm a man today.
Quite interesting to watch Stranger Things and see, of course it was set in the 80s, that although most of the music was music from the 80s, the big smash that emerged from the Netflix series was Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush from the 1970s. You see, since the 1960s and 70s, when we all used to make mass appeal music that grandparents loved and small children loved and everyone in between loved and sold, I have to say, millions of copies. My first hit, Everyone's Gone to the Moon, actually sold 9 million copies on vinyl as a single when it was first released. What happened in the 80s and then in the 90s was that bands like Duran Duran emerged and basically sold loads of records on the videos. Great videos were made and they were all very good-looking boys. Then it moved into the 90s and you got things like Britpop, which appealed to a more specialist area of music lover, like Oasis and Blur, for example, and still appealed to quite a few people outside those groups, but not so many. And then we got into this new century. Just before the new century, I had my last couple of major mass appeal hits that I was connected to, the basic one was I Get Knocked Down But I Get Up Again, called Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. And then, of course, it was Who Let the Dogs Out? Now, Who Let the Dogs Out started off with me going to my hairdresser. As you can see, I don't have enough hair to go to a hairdresser these days. But I went to my hairdresser, Keith. Keith worked at Smile. In fact, he founded Smile in the King's Road. And I've been going to him and his partner Paul before him for decades. Anyway, Keith was a big fan of steel drums and carnivals, and every year he used to go out to the Caribbean and attend all the carnivals. In fact, I think he was closely linked to one of the steel bands. And every year he brought back all the hits from the carnival that were played usually live on floats as they went around the carnival. Well, one year he came back and he said, I think there's an absolute smash on here, and gave me his, because he always made up CDs. Those were the days of CDs. He always made up CDs to give to his close friends. And I was a close friend, still am, I hope. And he gave it to me, Keith Wainwright, and I listened to it, and I thought, my God, he's absolutely right. And the song was Who Let the Dogs Out? Well, I tried to get hold of the original tape and discovered there wasn't one. It had only been recorded by Keith on his cassette tape recorder on the float. So I then had to go round the houses to find out who'd written the song. And I found out it was a man called Anselm Douglas. I found out through a record shop in wherever it was, Jamaica or Barbados or the Bahamas. And all this was done on the phone, by the way. And I ended up calling this guy and saying, look, could he go into the studio and make a proper version of it? And he said, yes, he would, and he did so. And he sent it to me, and I called him and I said, look, I'm terribly sorry, but it's lost all the buzz and the feeling and the fun it had when I first heard it. Would you mind awfully if I tried to do a version of it? And he said, no, I'd be absolutely delighted, because the whole thing had disappeared by then. So I went into the studio and I recorded it under the name Fat Jack and His Pack of Pets. And we put it out, and it didn't do a thing. The only thing it did was we got loads of calls from the few people who were playing it, mainly in, believe it or not, hospital radio, saying, we're getting an incredible reaction to this. And the other thing we got was my little nephew, William. My brother Andy had two sons at the time, Oliver, who was the older one, and William, who was the younger one. And every time we all met up at my mum's house down in Surrey, William used to insist on coming out to the car, which was usually my little baby car, my Suzuki, and actually insisting on me playing him the cassette, I think it was in those days, of my version of Who Let the Dogs Out, because he loved it so much. I thought, you know what, this is a smash. If a small, I think he was 6 at the time, if a small 6-year-old adores it, it's got mass appeal. Well, I kept playing it to people, but nobody liked it. And my friend Steve Greenberg, who'd had a lot of success in America, some of it linked to me, because he made an album with General Johnson, who was the singer of Chairman of the Board, remember them, and the Ramones, remember them, and he made an album which I thought was brilliant, but nobody else liked. But we pushed it like mad in my tip sheet at the time, and as a result, Steve Greenberg got a deal with a record company in Britain and absolutely was beholden to me forever. He then found a record again, which he made, called Bop by Hanson. And again, I was the only person in the original days who championed that. So Steve and I were quite good friends. Anyway, I played it to Steve 8 times. Every time we had dinner, I insisted on taking him back to my apartment in New York and playing him this track. And he couldn't stand it. But finally, after the 8th time, he said, you know what, Jonathan? I do think that song's good. I just hate your version. Would you mind if I recorded it with a group I've got called the Baha Men? I said, no, please do, Steve. I'd be delighted if somebody did, because I'm sure it's a hit. He did, and before even releasing it, he sent me the most enormous check, several $1,000s, as a thank you, which he really didn't have to do because I didn't own the song or anything. Anyway, the song went on to sell, I think, 16 million copies, but it was actually my last real major hit record before Surrey Police and Max Clifford interfered, had me arrested, wrongly convicted, sent to prison for a couple of years, and that was the end of my time in the music world. But what I notice these days is what everybody still loves is mass appeal music, just like Who Let the Dogs Out?
Who let the dogs out?
Well, to fool the whole rotten cheat and pull a crippling red pants away. You was a fat man. You was old, you was ugly, you was sweet like a pig. Take up your things and run. You're unintelligent, ugly, so that bright
It was breaking bad, it was bumping. Yippee-i-oh. And everybody having a ball. Yeah, man. Yippee-i-oh. Until the man left out to them calling. Oh, yeah. Yippee-i-oh. And every girl responded to their call. I hear a woman shout out. Who let the dogs out? 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 There's every minute and the boy called a million bucks down. Cause tell, get back fluffy, nice puppy, get back you flea infested mongrel. Pull down the music, hey! Yippee-i-oh. Because a ding-a-ding out of hand, yeah man! Yippee-i-oh. Because everybody started singing it, oh! Yippee-i-oh. From a DJ to the barman, all the party singing. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? There's every minute and the boy called a million bucks dance can tell. Get back fluffy, nice puppy, get back you flea infested mongrel. If he don't have a bone, doggy hold the bone. A doggy is nothing if he don't have a bone, doggy hold the bone. No one ever said a man would get hungry, yeah. Yippee-i-oh. Hit him girl, call him Dick Canine, yeah man. Yippee-i-oh. But he's telling me that he's part of the party, bro. Yippee-i-oh. There's a woman in front of him and behind, everybody's singing. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Sadly, I've reached the age where many of my friends are passing on. Virtually daily I hear news, and my dear Janet, who was a girlfriend of mine back in the 70s, has passed away. She got a brain tumour analysed last year, and we were in fairly constant touch. Her husband was also diagnosed with some very serious illness, and I was able to give them both advice. Sad days, but it's the way the world goes. And it's a bit 6 degrees of separation. If you read Inga's obituary in the Times, I mentioned Inga Elliott passing away earlier. Inga was married to Oz, my godfather, or my brother's godfather, and Oz was, for a while, deputy mayor of New York underneath Abe Beame. And when I moved to New York with the Bean to live there for a while, I introduced Bean to Oz and Elliot to look after while I was away, because Bean was only 18 or something. And as a matter of interest, they got on very well. But as a matter of interest, Bean, of course, then got to know them. But also, I was telling Bean just now about Janet passing away, because Bean knew Janet very well, and thought to myself, it's really amazing. 6 degrees of separation. If you have never seen the film, do watch it. It was based on Inga and Oz Elliot and the young man who pretended to be Sidney Poitier's son. Anyway, I think we'll finish today with a track that someone else who lived in New York and who I was planning to have lunch with, literally 2 days after he was assassinated, was my friend John Lennon. And I mentioned some while back on an earlier episode how John often used to come to my house, or my flat then, sometimes after we'd been clubbing together. We'd go back there and listen to music. And we often discussed how we both made music. In a similar way, if there was a record out that we really loved, we listened to it sometimes 200 or 300 times, and there were a couple of bits in the record that we really loved, and we then made a song, created a song and a record using those bits or those ideas in order to make something completely new and completely different. And I was actually hooked on a track called Clean Up Woman by Betty Wright at the time, and had made another track of my own called It's a Tall Order for a Short Guy, based on that. And I remember one time at a nightclub bringing John back to my flat and playing him the track, which he absolutely loved. He wasn't a fan of much of my music, John, but this one he really loved and understood how I'd made it. So take a listen and see you next time.